Welcome to another Tech Stuff Tuesday. This week we're going to take a look at the DD-1 Plus Distortion Detector. Does it work? Does it not work? Should you buy one? Is it useful? Is it just a waste of money? We're going to find out. So the purpose of this tool is to check for distortion in your system to set your gains. It's supposed to be an easy way of finding the maximum clean volume on your head unit and your amplifier. So we're going to check that out. There are two different ways that you can check to see where your head unit clips. And the first one is going to be taking the signal output from the low level RCA out of the head unit into this box. And from here, we've got a fresh battery. You should not use a power supply on this. It can induce noise, as you'll actually see on this one. This is the O-scope where we can verify. We'll check from the amp. We won't be doing it on the RCAs. But you see there's a little bit of noise in here. That's from the actual power supply. So that's why you don't use one. But everything, once you get some more activity on this, it's fine. It clears up and everything's accurate. So here we're reading 0 volts. Now this is going to read nothing till almost 1 volt. So if you have a head unit that is only a half a volt output or 750 millivolts, this is not going to work at all. Just so you know. You don't have to be mad about it. Just know this doesn't work unless it's 900 millivolts or higher. Don't blame me, blame the head unit. If it's less than 900 millivolts, it won't work. So we have the volume all the way down. We are going to use track number 1, which is 40 hertz and 0 dB. Now, what is 0 dB? That is the recording volume. Maximum volume, it can be less than that. It cannot be more than that unless it is clipping. So everything is set to 0 on here. No bass boost, no treble, no mid-range, no EQ settings, loudness turned off. Everything is flat, like you just plugged it in fresh, no power. The amplifier, we want to have the gain all the way down. We want to have no crossovers turned on. So right now this is set to full range. We do have high pass, low pass, subsonic, all that stuff. All of it is turned off. That'll be pertinent when we plug into the amp, but we're doing it ahead of time to make sure we don't skip that step. So here we have head unit. We're going to go up on volume. We're still not reading anything at volume 12. We now have a 40 hertz detect. And there we go. So volume 22 is 0.9 volts. 23, 1.1. We're going to keep going. All right, we're distorting at 1.9 volts. And we're clean at 1.5 to 1.6. It's teetering there a little bit. And that is volume 25. Alpine head units typically go up to volume 35. So this at volume 25 is clipping according to this device. We're going to remember that. That was 1.5, 1.6 volts. And as I said, when you go to 26, it goes to 1.9. Now this is supposed to be a 2 volt head unit, I believe. If we keep going up on volume, 1.9 volts stays the same. So from 26 to 35, it's the same voltage, always clipped. So we're going to turn the volume all the way down. And just for due diligence, we're going to check the other channel, just in case you end up having a bad RCA or maybe something's wrong with the head unit, or in some cases it can actually just read differently. So we're going to do the same process again. Volume 25 is doing the same thing. Volume 26 clips. So everything seems to be the same on both channels on this head unit. We do have good RCAs, which is going to be key. These are Sundown Audio RCAs. You can buy these on emfcaraudio.com. And make sure that you don't use super cheap RCAs. Cheap ones are not necessarily so bad, but the super cheap ones can cause problems that would give you a bad reading, which may throw things off. It can induce a lot of noise into the system, which may cause a problem. So now we can plug into the amplifier. You're going to want to turn off the amp, plug in your signal, then turn it back on. We have our lead going directly to the amplifier, and we've got it connected to the positive and negative on the amplifier. Then we also have the positive and negative leads going to the O-scope. So the O-scope here is going to basically verify what we're seeing here. This distortion lights up, we should see distortion over here in the actual sine wave. This will also tell us the voltage that's coming through, as this should. So, starting with track number 1, which again is 40 Hertz. The gain is all the way down, as the manual states. And we don't want to potentially induce the amplifier clipping. Remember, we're just double checking the other way that we can find the maximum clean volume from the head unit. So now we're at volume 20, we've got 1.5 volts. Volume 25 is 4.4 volts, which it said it was clipping before. 5.6 volts on volume 26 says it's clipping. So that confirms we're not getting much power out of this amplifier, but it is sensing that it is dirty from the head unit at 26. So either way gives the same result. So we're going to turn the volume back down. Something else that you can do is go to track number 2, which is 1 kilohertz. This will also verify if you have a different spot of clipping. So we're on 1 kilohertz. We're going to turn up the volume. Once we get over 900 millivolts, we've got 1 kilohertz detect, 1.1 volts, and we're going to go up to volume 25, which shows clean, 4 volts, 4.8 volts, volume 26 shows distortion. So that confirms at 1 kilohertz and 40 hertz we get the same result, so it should be good for sub and mids. Now we can move into actually finding the proper gain spot for this amplifier. Now this is a 4-channel amp from Sundown Audio. It is an SAX 50.4, and again we're going to leave all of our crossover settings totally flat. We don't want to have any extra signal being added by the amp or the head unit to find the proper gain position. We know the maximum volume we can go on the head unit that is clean. That's volume 25. We've got the gain all the way down. We're going to turn up the gain until this says distortion. And when it says distortion, we should also see it right here. So that's what we were going to do. Volume 25. Up on the gain, you see voltage increasing. See our wave over here. We have distortion, no distortion. Bump it up just a hair. 18.4 volts is showing distortion. We do have it showing a slight clip right there. We're going to hit read. And this is saying that plus 15 dB is the overlap. Now that we know this is 15 dB, we can adjust it to where we want to. So why would we adjust this? Well, currently we're right at the verge of clipping. So we need to back it off a hair to where we're not clipping. But anything that you're listening to that is less than a 0 dB recording, which is what is happening here, you're not going to get the full volume or full power out of your amplifier. So we're going to turn this back to whatever level that you want to do. And we're going to say it's -5. So that's going to give us a little bit of leeway, but we should still be in pretty good shape to not clip anything. So we're going to turn this down. To 10 dB, but our power has gone from 18 volts, or on this one it read 19.2, down to 11.3. So cutting out that 5 dB has actually cut our power significantly. Not quite in half, but using this method, it's not going to clip. The problem is, you also don't get the power out of your amplifiers. So now we've got a choice to make. We've backed off the gain, so we're right at what would be considered 0 dB with a clean signal. The amplifier is making 18 volts per channel, and as you hear, this is a clean signal. Remember, 18.4 was clipping, so it was just a little bit. That should be perfect to get the absolute maximum clean signal out. As long as we don't exceed volume 25 here, this will never ever clip. And that means it works. But do you want to have guaranteed to not clip? Or do you want to actually get all the power that you want out of your amps? You paid all this money for these amps, but you're not going to get all the power. You saw when we backed it off, you start losing a lot of power to get the most out of any given recording volume and still be safe. Not saying that this doesn't function, but you have to decide, do you want more power and more output out of your system? Or do you want to guarantee that it will not clip? That's one thing that this cannot do for you. So why did this come up? Well, one of our subscribers, Mitch Antonson, sent this to us. This is his DD-1 Plus, and he wanted us to check this out because a lot of people say, I set my gains with the DD-1, it is impossible for my system to be clipping. And that's where this comes in. Now we know the maximum volume. We know the maximum that we're definitely not going to clip on this amplifier. So can you still clip? Yes, you can. I'm going to show you how. You saw here that everything is set clean. So what if something changes? You got all this set up and you go, I want a little bit of bass boost. Track 4 is our overlap for 1 kilohertz. Track 3 is our overlap for 40 hertz. And we're going to add a little bit of bass boost because you want it to sound a little bit different. In that bass boost, we got to go down to the 40 hertz, 0 dB, and it's hard clipping. It's very hard clipping. It says 18.6 volts, which should be clipping, but that is a very, very hard clip. We didn't change the volume. We just went down to 0 dB on here. So on that overlap where it showed the 15 dB, I turned the gain up according to how it said. And a 0 dB track is an extreme hard clip. Also interesting, this says 25.4 volts where this says 18.6 volts. So apparently we've got to turn the gain way down. Till it says no distortion. So the overlap track you cannot use as a reference for a gain position. It's only good for telling you what that overlap is. And then if you set it back to set it to 10, I mean, it'll tell you how many volts it is, but then you can't use that track for your actual gain setting, because if you do, it still won't be right because we had to back off the gain to get 18 volts. So you can't really use the same tracks for the same purpose. The overlap tracks are more for an informational thing. You can't actually use them to set the gain. That is one way that you can absolutely set your gains using the DD-1 and make it distort. At volume 25, we're at a very clean signal. This is showing just a hair clip, but this is not indicating distortion. And it says 18.4 volts and not showing distortion where we are here. I trust the oscilloscope more. So I'm going to back that off to 18.0 volts. Both are showing clean. And now we're going to introduce this bass boost that you so desperately wanted, even just a little bit. And now we're clipping and showing distortion. We barely added any at all. I barely moved that knob. And we're clipping. And the oscilloscope appears to show clipping before this does. So, yes, you can clip this even though you set your gains because you made a bass boost change. Now I know you're thinking, I don't use bass boost on my amp, I shouldn't. Okay, let's look at your bass level. So we're going to adjust the bass level on the head unit. We go to +1, we get a small clip. This is not indicating it, but the oscilloscope is. Bass 2, now we're showing distortion and a lot more clipping. And all we did was went up 2 on the bass level from 0, and it started clipping. This means any EQ setting that you adjust in here after setting your gain is going to potentially cause clipping. Now the manual says to leave all of this flat, leave the head unit flat, leave the amp flat, and that's how you get your maximum numbers, and that's how you get the proper setting. But then if you go up in the EQ, on bass, on treble, anything like that, it shows that it will cause clipping, making the setting that you made here inaccurate. Now some might argue that, well, you changed the setting, so you should go to your bass, treble, and set all that stuff up, and then go back and do this, but that's not what it says to do. It says to do it with everything flat. So again, it is possible to have clipping when you set your gain with this tool. It's not to say that this tool does not work. It's to say that there are problems that are outside of that. You can cause clipping. So with everything set how it is, to put this in perspective, it's set up for 0 dB. And this is not going to clip in any condition unless we go up on the bass or up on the bass boost, or we make any type of change that involves a plus in it. If you do a minus, it's not going to. But anywhere in an EQ or anything, if you add any signal in any part of this, it's going to clip. We can set it back a few dB, 3 or 5 dB, but we're going to cut power depending on the actual recording volume. So what does that mean? These videos that I produce, I put out at 0 dB. So in this setting, you'll get the most output possible. If you were playing this very video on your system, you would get the most output possible without clipping. But if you had it set to -2 or -3 dB, as a lot of recordings are, and some even -5, and that's going to vary based on who produced it, the actual master volume on the disc or the flash drive or anything like that. If you were to play this video when you had it set up at -2 or -3, you're going to be hard clipping the entire system. So that's what that means when you're setting the decibel level on that. You can clip if you set for lower and the recording volume is higher. So we set this with a CD. But what happens when you use a flash drive or a phone or something else? Well, we can solve that by using this flash drive. We'll swap over to USB audio. This is track number 1. We have not changed the volume. We're still on 25, but it's showing distortion. So the only thing that we've done is swap sources. We're going to track number 2, which is 1 kilohertz, which is fine. This is clean, but 40 hertz was not. That's going to be a product of the compression going through USB or something with the processing of this head unit. But the fact still remains, these are the settings that we had, and they're different. You might say, okay, because 25 is clean here, 40 hertz distorts on volume 25, which actually now it says it's not. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This is showing a slight clip here. This is not. So the oscilloscope is going to be a little more accurate, it seems. We're going to reset the track. Oh, that's why. Track number 1. So we've got distortion, showing distortion. We're going to back this off to where it's clean. We're still showing a little bit of distortion here, but not here, and that's at exactly 18.4 volts. So we're going to back it off to 18.2 or 18.0. So we've got 18.2 volts. This is now showing clean. This was showing clean even when this was showing dirty. So this is our 0 dB, 40 hertz. And now we're safe. This is showing 18.2 volts, 18.2 volts. We're going to go back up to 1 kilohertz. 16.8 volts, 17.2 volts. Not sure why there's a discrepancy there. But both are showing clean because we base it off of 40 hertz instead of 1 kilohertz. On the CD, we didn't see a difference. On the USB, we did. So if you set it with the CD, then you go use your flash drive, you could be clipping. If you set it with the flash drive, but then you went to CD, you could be clipping. If you're using your phone and you set it with either of those, you could be clipping. So again, this does work for telling you on the source at that overlap level, is it clipping or not? But you could change sources, which again is just changing anything from that setting. You can change sources, and we saw clipping. Again, proving you can clip setting your gains with a DD-1. The oscilloscope confirmed all of that along with this, although the oscilloscope was showing some clipping where the DD-1 was not. So where we're at now, we know if you change sources, you can clip. If you change any settings at all, you can clip. So why would you use this? Well, it's a little bit easier if you don't know how to use an oscilloscope, but the plus in DD-1 Plus is plus $100. This is $290. I bought this thing probably 15 years ago, and I don't think it cost that much then. You can get oscilloscopes relatively cheap now, I think $100 or maybe even less. So from a cost standpoint, I'm going to go oscilloscope. It tells me more detail, and it does it cheaper. So that just makes sense to me. But this does function for what it's intended for. The problem is if you change anything, you're misled as to what actually could be clipping or not. The same would go for an O-scope. If you changed anything there, you could be clipping. In that case, you should be trusting your ears. Listen for distortion. That's the best distortion detector. It's your brain. Use your brain to detect distortion, and then you don't have to worry about it. So another purpose that you could use this for, and where you may or may not want to use the oscilloscope at all, but it said that because you can set maximum loudness with this, you can put this in car, not just on a resistive load. And when you do it in car, you can get your maximum SPL. So we're talking SPL competition. It's going to give us the best result possible. So what do we do next? We take this in car, we set it up for SPL, and we'll compare that to how I would normally set an amp for SPL, or even just the one setup that I've got in there. So let's go compare. If you're still watching, I'm going to assume that you like this video. So make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed. Hit the notification bell so so you can see all of our future videos. And also check out all of our older videos. But if you're still watching this and you don't like this video, then I'm assuming you're just continuing to watch to try to find fault in it to comment below, because that's what you do. And that's assuming that you even started to watch it before you commented. But here's the current setup. We will not be using our America 12K because that's a bit extreme for this purpose. What we are going to be using is our Orion HCCA 2100. This amplifier is from about 1997, 1998, and it does not accept a lot of input voltage. So that is also something you need to be aware of, is the limits of your equipment. We've got one lowballer 15 in a box that was thrown together. Is not particularly great. We're not looking at the SPL numbers. We're only looking at the comparison of different settings, be it with the DD-1, without using the DD-1, and also we're going to look at volume level on recordings and show the difference of what happens there. So this is the setup. We're first going to find the maximum volume on the head unit, which we've got here. This is another Alpine. It is a different model. The maximum volume on this one is also 35. So we're going to use track number 1. We're going to go up on volume so you can see this a little better. And we're still reading 0 volts, 0 volts, 0 volts. And we're at maximum 35 with 0 volts and barely detecting. Now, the reason for this is a 4 volt head unit, but the only way to get 4 volts out of it is to actually have the sub volume all the way up. And you see now we're detecting voltage as I go up on sub volume. So we're at sub volume 15 and we're at maximum volume. And we're getting 3.0 volts and it's totally clean. So we can get to full volume here, and we're going straight off the head unit into this. We're not going through this knob, but we're going to test this again going through the knob, and I'm going to show you possibly why. This is something that you may run into. So remember, if you're setting your gains directly off of this, make sure you don't change anything, because this might make a difference, and we're going to find out. So we're going to go all the way down on the volume. We're going to turn this off. You don't want to unplug your RCAs or anything with it on. So we're going to disconnect RCAs. We're going to plug in these so we go through the knob. So I'm going to get that set up. With the knob now connected, we're going to do the same test. Now remember, all of your crossovers and everything else are going to be set as high frequency as possible, everything else flat, no bass, anything like that, because if you have any of that set and you change it, that can make it clip. So we're going to go up on volume, showing voltage. Volume 35 is not clipping, however, we're showing 3.4 volts. So somehow, some way, I would have to dig further in to figure it out. This is not active at all, but somehow we have a higher voltage using the knob. That doesn't make any sense, but we do. So if you didn't have this knob in here, you had straight RCAs, you connect it, you set everything up for 3 volts. Now you later go put this in, and now you have 3.4 volts. You're going to clip. So even though you set it with this made a change in line voltage, it is possible to clip. I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself, but there's a reason for that. You can clip when you set this because you made a change. Even just putting this knob in line, it doesn't make sense that you would gain 0.4 volts. It still did it. It's a change. Higher voltage, gonna clip. So now we'll get this all set up at the amplifier side of things. We'll get the amp gain tweaked in, and then we will check SPL from there. Now with the leads connected from the output of the amplifier into the DD-1, we've got the head unit, The knob is all the way up. We're going to turn up the volume till 35 because we know it's clean at that point. I've got the gain adjustment ready to go, but because this amp is so old, it won't take 5 or 6 volts like most modern amps. The max, I believe, is around 2 volts. So we may not actually get to volume 35 before this is going to start clipping. So we're going to go up on volume, keeping an eye on this. So we saw a little bit of distortion there at that volume click between 22 and 23. It just goes away. None of the other clicks do it. There, it made that little click again. Between 32 and 33. And then 34. 35, we're maxed out, so now we can go up on the gain. So we're starting at 55.8. Just barely on the level. If I try going up, no more voltage comes out. So we're going to back it off very slowly. So now we're at 55.8, and it says no distortion, 55.6. And that is a end of track, I believe. Yeah, so it came back. So there we go, we've adjusted this out. That should be the maximum output that we can get from this. So we're going to go to volume 35 on here when we go to use our test tones to check SPL, and we should get the maximum power possible if this is accurate. Now keep in mind, the sub volume is all the way up and the volume will be all the way up as well. Now I've got DB Jam's volume 18 disc in here with all the tones, and I believe it is recorded at 0 dB. The way that this is set up for the gain should be at 0 dB. So this should give us the maximum capable SPL with the sub volume all the way up, the actual volume all the way up, and this knob all the way up. Now I know this amp is very sensitive to any kind of clipping or surge in the signal, so I'm going to roll into it and go all the way up on the knob with volume all the way up here, and that should give us the best possible SPL. So we're going to check power and SPL right here on the term lab. The scope is set up on the probe and power max, so that should tell us if it's clean or not. And that is a 147.6, 793 watts. And remember, I can't go up on volume because we set it to maximum volume. It did it clean at 35. The knob is all the way up. The sub volume is all the way up. Now, what if we change over to USB? Got on USB. It's the same disc, but it's on USB. Different input. We saw a difference on the bench, but do we see it in car? We'll reset this. Everything is still the same. We'll see slightly less SPL, slightly less power. So that tells me that the USB input on this head unit is slightly lower than the CD. So, and I have to repeat this again, if you set it with the CD, you're going to get a different result on USB, possibly. It might be higher, it might be lower. Your input changed, you can clip. So, recording volumes. What do we get? Well, I made some custom tracks so we can test that. I've got 3 different volume recordings on these tracks. One is -6, one's -3, and one is 0 dB. They're all the same tone. I made all of them. So what we're gonna see is how your power and your SPL changes with all those recording levels. We're gonna start with -6. So for a comparison of, if you set it at -6, this would be the maximum that you would be getting out of your system. So the volume is all the way up. We're gonna turn the knob all the way to maximum. And that's all we get, 141.9 and 200 watts. That's at -6. We're gonna change it to -3. -3. $145.4, and we went up to 454 watts. So we gained a little bit over double power, which makes sense because that was 3 dB. That's also reflected in the score. Now we're gonna go to 0 dB. So that should be how the DD-1 set it up for maximum output. Anything louder in the recording itself would be clipping. There you go, 147.6, 782 watts. And that's pretty consistent with the CD that we were using for tones. There's a slight difference, but right in line there. So from this demonstration, you can see that if you set your overlap up at -3 dB, anything that would be over that, like this tone, would be clipping. It would be hard clipping. There's a huge power difference there. If you went with 0.6, you're also going to have way more clipping if the recording volume is above -6. As I mentioned before, these videos are in 0 dB, just like this recording. So if you set it for 0, you're not going to clip. But if your recording is at -6, you saw we only got 200 watts versus almost 800 out of the 0 dB. There's a very large difference there. So you pretty much have to choose, do you want to potentially be clipping, or do you want to get way less power than your amps are capable of? That's a decision for you to make. So where do we go from here? O-scope was clean. There's our number. We showed the head unit clean. We showed the amplifier clean. So what can we do? Well, we can go back to the original settings that I use for SPL for this amp and this sub. I'm going to go back and change all of these to how I would normally do it without using any tools at all. No O-scope, no DMM, no anything. And I'm going to tell you exactly how I set it up, and then we're going to check SPL. Now I have gone back to the CD as we did in the first one, so I'll have a direct comparison. I'm on track 60, same as we were before. We've got the meter reset, and I am actually at volume 25 right now. The subwoofer volume is set all the way down, so we don't actually have that much RCA voltage, and I'm going to roll into this and see what result we get for SPL and power. We've got 956 watts, 148.3, and we still look about the same on the oscilloscope there. So I got more power, more SPL, significantly more, out of using my settings. So how did I get there? I had the sub volume all the way down because I want all the defaults of when you just plug up the head unit and let it rip. So I disconnect and reconnect power in this thing all the time. Bass is flat. Subwoofer volume by default comes up on 0. So I just left all the defaults. I go to the gain and I set it to all the way up. Just maxed it out. And then I go to the volume and I turn it up until it stops getting louder. If I go to volume 26, it's just going to clip. It might show a little bit more power, but it's just going to clip Maybe I'll do a little bit higher SPL, just barely, maybe a 1/10 if I'm lucky. But that's all I did, and no tools. Gain all the way up, volume up until it stops getting louder. Sometimes you can go to a volume click and then tweak it with a little bit more, like on the sub volume, because that's a little bit more incremental than a volume click. So I might go up 1 or 2 clicks and try those as well. But that's all I did. And I got almost a dB louder and more power from not using a DD-1 or an O-scope or a DMM, just sheer testing. So I showed you how using this can set a perfectly clean signal every time. But I also showed you how it can make it so you don't get all the power out of your amps that you paid for. You probably saved your money for a while, and then you're going to get half or even a third of the power that you could be using. But the signal's clean, so there's that. At $290, I just get an oscilloscope and it will give you a better visual demonstration than an LED lighting up as an indicator. But it is portable. I guess it's relatively easy to use. I mean, it did what it said it would do. It's just if you change anything after those settings or you play a track that has a different recording volume, it's still going to clip. So it is, and proven, possible that you can clip while setting your gain with a DD-1 or DD-1 Plus or anything like that. It is not completely impossible to do so. For all the people that said, I set my gain with the DD-1, it was never clipping. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and maybe even learned something, and if you made it all the way through it, congratulations. Now, if you're just looking for something wrong in it, make sure you go back and watch it again, and then make sure you post what you think is wrong in the comments. And if you think I did everything right in this, also comment below. If you have any questions about how all this works, the Lowballer 15, or even this Orion HCCA 2100, make sure you comment those below. Make sure you shop emfcaraudio.com so you can buy Lowballer 15s. All the offerings from Sundown Audio, Excess Power, SBC, Audio Control. We've got shirts, we've got beanies, hats, all that stuff right on the website. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and you can also support us on Patreon. All of those are in the links below. And I'll see you again in another Tech Stuff Tuesday.